Hey, I wanted to do a video about this juniper, which I've already featured before in another video, and I'll post a link to it. And the reason why I'm focusing on this one is because I did a video on it before, and because it's kind of a problem child tree of mine. It's got a really bad trunk that is not very attractive to look at. It's got a few problems with it. First of all, it doesn't have a particularly wide base, which is common among junipers of this variety. And it has a very straight base there that then makes a really hard angle this direction. And this big kind of bump here that creates something of an inverse taper a little bit there. It's not terribly attractive, that really hard, almost right angle. And so it's been hard for me to come up with a way to shape this tree to make it look attractive. And I've been struggling with it for the last few years, and I thought I'd take you with me on a little journey as I try to continue to figure out what to do with it. Partly because I'm sure that if you're into bonsai that you're going to encounter this very same problem. I know that when I'm looking at videos on YouTube, I tend to appreciate videos that show imperfect trees, trees that have real significant problems, because I want to see how the artist deals with them. And so that's what I'm trying to show here. You probably have trees that aren't very perfect and not top quality, or you'd probably be watching somebody else's video feed, quite frankly. But in this case, what I want to show you is my current solution to this. Now, I have a couple of options for what to do with it. What I could do is take this tree and I could just stick it in the ground and let it grow for several years. That prevents an opportunity for the trunk to further develop, for uncontrolled growth to lead to a thickening of branches and maybe different shapes in branches and the trunk. That might make it a little easier to work with and make it a little more attractive. So that's one option that you should consider if you have a real difficult tree that you just can't figure out how to style. You may just want to plant it in the ground if you can. This would survive where I live here just fine. The problem is that on my property, I don't have a lot of space for me to be planting trees and just letting them sit for years. And on top of that, I just kind of don't want to with this one. I've been wanting to kind of work with it as it is for whatever reason. So I'm going to try to work with it as is and see what I can do with it. So I have come up with a different approach to it. I'm going to radically alter the shape of this tree because I just don't think that there's an easy way around this problem with the basic shape that I've got now. I've got some curves in this tree, and that trunk really makes curves not what I want to go for. Curves work well with a curved trunk, but when you have an awkwardly angular trunk, then curves kind of conflict aesthetically with the angularness of the trunk. So what I'm going to try to do is really redesign it and try to work with the angularness that the trunk gives me. And that's a principle that I try to encourage as you're thinking about how to design your tree. Kind of go with what the tree is giving you rather than trying to necessarily impose your style on the tree, particularly when you have an older tree that's several years old and maybe many of the limbs or the trunk are already quite thick and they're going to be hard to reshape in any significant way. So you're kind of stuck with the structure, the basic structure that the tree is giving you at that point. I'm just going to try to use this trunk to my advantage the best I can is the goal here. So let's see what we can do here. Okay, so here's the tree, and I'm just going to start by rotating it for you just so you have a sense of the overall shape of the tree a little better in 3 dimensions. So the dominant branch here is the main trunk line. It goes up here, and then it goes up into a long curving branch down this direction. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that off, because the branch that I think I want to preserve is this one over here, way low down. If I could potentially preserve this one up here and work with that one, but I'm looking at it, and I think that this is going to be the better option. Partly because there's a curve here in the main trunk line, and it's just a slight curve, but I'm trying to eliminate curves, at least in the trunk, because again of the very angular trunk. So I'm going to try to keep things as angular as I can, and so we're going to start by cutting that off. Okay, so I'm actually, I'm going to try to keep this upper branch here, or not this one, but this bit of stump now, because I may try to gin that. And if you're unfamiliar, ginning is where you take a piece of, a dead or, broken branch or trunk, and you remove the bark and peel it away so that you're exposing the dead heartwood, and that's just for decorative purposes, something that some people like. Certainly it's not something you have to do, but I was thinking that I may hold on to that and gin it, to give the tree a better sense of age, to kind of give the impression that maybe this is a tree that had grown quite tall, but then for whatever reason there was a storm and it broke the top trunk and left behind the base that has since tried to adapt and adjust in its own way. So again, so this is the branch that I think I want to work with, and I'm going to rewire and prune these branches a little bit to start to create some foliage pads, the basic structure for the foliage pads. So that's my next step. I'm going to hold on to this branch for now. I don't think I'm going to keep it, but I don't know, I might decide to hold on to it. We'll just sort of see here. So that's what I'm going to do now, is I'm going to work on these branches. What I'm going to be doing here is trying to start by eliminating any foliage that is protruding from the bottom side of the branch, because foliage pads look older and more mature and developed when the foliage is largely pointed upwards and not downwards. So I'm removing downward pointed foliage, and I'm also thinking about which of these inner branches are ones that I want to keep and which are ones that I want to start to cut out. So that's all I'm doing right now, is just giving a look through. Okay, so I'm starting to add some wire to this tree. As I've talked about in other videos, I like to reuse wire from other projects rather than constantly use new wire. Whenever possible, I try to reuse and recycle previously used wire, just kind of have to re-straighten it out a little bit. And you know, wire lasts a long time if you take care of it, I think. And so I'm using, now I'm switching to a thinner gauge wire right now because my thicker gauge wire wasn't long enough. So I'm trying to wire this longer, lower branch. I took the thicker wire there and I applied it in a U pattern, so half of the wire goes down this branch, half of the wire goes down this branch, and they meet at the joint. That's the preferred way of doing it because it looks nice, and it also anchors the wire very well because each side is kind of anchored to the other side. That's aluminum wire that I'm using there, but this thinner gauge wire that I'm using right now is actually copper. Copper is firmer than aluminum, but it's also expensive. So I don't usually use copper. And this branch already has a curve in it here. I don't know if I can feature that there. So it already has a nice curve to it. I may have added that in the past. I don't honestly remember, but we'll utilize that. I think that's something we want to build on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a sharper angle. Again, we're trying to increase the angularity of this tree. And I've thinned off a bunch of little tiny branches. I don't want to go too crazy because I don't want to totally sap this juniper of its strength. Junipers can get really weakened if they don't have enough foliage on them. So I want it to bounce back next spring. And so I want it to be real healthy. So I'm going to keep a lot of extra little branches that I'll probably eventually cut off. But for now, I just want to keep them here to make. So now the question is, what do I do about this branch here? You know, in general, I want to try to preserve branches whenever possible. Helps me keep the tree big and vigorous looking, but I'm not sure if I think this works with the new design that I'm creating here. It looks too symmetrical. We've got two of these kind of downward sloping branches. I could bring this up, but I'm not sure that really adds anything. I think, for me at least, it feels like at this point, given this new design, the tree is wanting to go into a more traditional semi-cascade or cascade style with a heavy lean that direction. If I have a branch over here, it looks like it's balancing it I think aesthetically it looks compositionally, it looks like you've got two large branches that are helping to balance the tree in both directions. And given the strong angle here, I think, you know, how it's leaning that way, I think you don't want balance in the branches. You want it to go with the direction that the tree is kind of pointing you toward, which is this direction. So I think I should have it be less balanced and more heavily leaning this direction. Again, you may have a different take on this, but I think that's the call that I want to make. Still looking at it. I do kind of like that branch. I don't know that it works. So from this angle, I don't know, it looks a little better, but you know, there's a couple little buds down here. If I cut it back, then those might bud back and I might be able to regrow it from this point. Is that worth it? I don't know. Let's take a look here. I don't know. I might decide to gin this branch. That might be interesting. Or I might let it grow and see what goes on there. So I don't know. For now, I think I'm just going to leave it like that. And over here, you can see that I'm making some progress in developing some basic shape here. So my thoughts are that this will be one pad, this will be another pad, then this will be at the very least a third pad. So we've got lower, middle, top. And I might get rid of these branches. I don't know. I might develop those into additional little pads. Don't have to make all the decisions today. I've already made really big decisions. Bonsai is an art of patience, right? It teaches you patience. It teaches you not to make rash judgments, because the tree is going to be around for years and you can wait. All right, I think I'm gonna see if I can start to gin this little part up there and see how that goes. And I think that this is the front of the tree at this point. You know, as I'm turning it around, part of what I'm doing is thinking about, do I want to change the front now that I've made such a radical change to the overall shape? Does there need to be a different front that looks better? But I think my original sense for the front is still the same, at least for now. I think that this is probably the best front. I don't know, what do you think? Okay, so after all that hard work, this is where I think we're going to end up for now. So we cut off the top, cut off a lot of the side branches, and did some basic wiring here. I may come back and refine this wiring a little bit more later. I'm a pretty indecisive person by nature, and so I tend to wait and think a lot before I make decisions about trees. But for today, I think I'm comfortable with this. And as I'm turning it, I'm looking at the new shape and thinking about, okay, do I want something, what is the front of the tree now? And that I've made all these big changes. Does that still the front that I thought was the front? Is that still the best side of the tree, or is there a better side of the tree? And as I'm turning it, I feel like that front, the original front, is still the best side of the tree for now. I think I like this angle the best, but maybe you feel differently. I'm starting to shape this into maybe the top pad, top foliage pad, the apex. Then this one is a middle pad, and then I've got this one as a lower pad. I'm probably going to bring it back around this way, have it direct a little more toward the viewer as it's going along here. And I also may take these little side branches here and develop them into additional little foliage pads. I don't know. I may get rid of them. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. I think I like the gin. It's got a very angular curve there that I feel like supports the shape that we're going for. And the other change that I'm going to want to make is replacing the pot. So you can see that this is a pretty big, hefty pot that worked reasonably well when it was a really big tree, but now I've cut it in half, and this looks too big and hefty for this small little thing. But I'm not going to repot it right now, and that's because it's autumn right now, and it's too late in the year to repot this. The roots right now are full of nutrients from absorbing the sunlight and the fertilizer from the summer. So it's ready to go for next spring. And if I cut the roots off now, I'm depriving it of stored nutrients that I want it to use for putting out new foliage next year. And if I prune the roots to get it into a smaller pot, at this late stage in the season, the roots may not have time to recover before freezing weather sets in, and that may cause the roots to be damaged and die, causing the tree to either weaken or die over the winter. So to play things safe, I think I'm just going to leave it as is for the rest of the winter. I'm just going to leave it in this pot, put it in the storage, and then next spring I will pull it out, cut out the roots, put it into a smaller pot that works a little better. So that's my current plan. Anyway, I feel like this video has hopefully gotten across the point that I wanted to get across, which is that when you've got a tree that's just not cooperating in some way, it's got a design flaw that you just don't know how to work around, that doesn't mean it's the end of the world. There's almost always solutions if you're willing to put in the time and patience and even take some risks. This is still not a perfect design, but I think it's better than what it was, and I can see how it has potential for the future, and I hope you see that too. I think I'm going to end here, and let me know what you think. All right, bye.